Hello, my name is Susan Gonzalez, and this will be my presentation on point of view. Starting from the basics, the definition of narrative position in relation to the story being told. That is the basics of it, and I'll go into that. There are three different types of point of view. The first is first person, second person, and third person. First person is basically two times, well, not very much different from the beginning of the definition. And the second person is just that simply. The third person has a different types of style on it and different types of writings you could use, but I'll go into that later to be more specifics and examples. For the first person, it would be telling when the main character is telling the story of any novel. An example would be it was time like this when I thought my father, who hated guns, had never been in any wars with the greatest man who ever lived. That is from the Monk by Harper Lee. It is a great example of the main character or the protagonist being told or thinking and staying in their thoughts through their point of view and no one else's. And that is what the basic of the book is. And another example would be I cannot conclude that the bulk of your natives be the most pernicious race of little odious vermin of that nature ever suffered a crop on the surface. That is from Gulliver's Travels. It was a different book by Jonathan Swift first. It's basically another great example of the protagonist giving their thoughts or speaking out their mind to a certain character in relation to their thoughts. The first person peripheral is a person who's not really the main character. A really great example of this is from The Great Gatsby, and the main character Nick Carraway is a man who doesn't really commit much action in the story. He doesn't give much of his action to the people, or doesn't really go up to them and cause some sort of referral or some kind of action. He basically just details it all, writes it down like a writer, you could say, like he's an author of the story, but he's just basically detailing what's happening around him, the people around him, who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, information on what they're doing and how they said or what they said. He's basically nothing's really given him out. There's only a few times where you're given his thoughts. Another example would be Joseph Conrad's The Heart of Darkness, which is really been read in class. It is basically the telling the story from Marlowe. We're hearing the story from a guy named Marlowe who's telling the story from another guy who's Kurtz. And that's another example of it. Now, to second person, it's basically quite simple. It's the second person view. It's the perspective of a single character, the protagonist, to tell the story. The character is well defined with habits and traits and unique personality. The reader is simply placed behind this character, so he experiences the world he feels it. You're basically kind of seeing the world through the character of the book. You're not really in his mind, but he basically details you and explains to you what you can imagine, what could you picture. Like in this example, eventually you ascend the stairs to the street. You think Plato's pilgrims climbing out of the cave from the shadow of the world, appearances towards things they really are. You wonder if it is possible to change in this life. Jay McCroney from Big City. It's an example of you basically him detailing you what's happening, what's he's talking to you personally, not to some other person. It's just to you. It's a great example of the second person because it doesn't really go past the mark of being a first person where you're literally in their heads. They're just speaking and you can picture it with your own eyes or with your own imagination. And it's a great example of second person. Now, third person is kind of a lengthy one because there's a bunch of different types to it. I've created a few examples. For third person, you'll find narration with stories where you're a detached person outside the peripherals, and you're not exactly inside one of the characters' head unless it's chosen. An example is he was just a young man ought to be, she said, sensible, good humored, lively, and I never saw such happy manners, so much ease with such perfect good breathing. Judging from Pride and Prejudice. It's an example of third person where it goes into one of the characters in the book and it explains their view on things and what they see. It was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13 by George Orwell. That's another third person because you're not really in the point of anybody. You're just a narrator, stating the details and just getting out the specifics on what is happening. Or it could be a limited third person, where it can be only to a certain amount of people. Like in this example, is from Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets by J.K. Rowling. Harry had taken on this place in the wizard school where he was scar famous. Another school year was over. He was a bit of Dursleys and summer went back to train like a dog. He rolled in something smelly. The Dursleys even remember that the day to be here. Of course, he hoped had a bit high. This is another example of Harry's point of view and what he is thinking. And we'll also switch to other point of views of what other people believe and truly think. Last of the multiple is basically another way of it being limited, but it's also multiple people, and you don't really have to state specifics to that, which is doesn't really need much of an example because, or you could read that right here if you need it, but it's really just the same thing. But it's just multiple people, not just only limited to two. And the last one is the omniscient. It's when they have a bird's eye view of what's going on, such as the example on the bottom. Johnston banged his fist against the wall hard once, but that did nothing to Spurs of fear and courage through him. He still couldn't believe it. I'll have to leave now, he said, thinking that he could stay over it. Veronica only snoring. He was upset now, but now he'd get over. She knew he'd get over it. That's another point of view where he literally switched from John to Veronica's point of view very quickly and very swiftly, without much stopping and learning through the truth. Now, and that was it. That was all the presentation. It's not that complicated, really. If you just read through it and look at the examples, I'm sure you'll get the hang of it. That is all.